A human-looking creature walked into the main chamber of Epsilon O facility, without triggering a single security system. When it touched a mysterious, ancient artifact, the entire hallway echoed with the words, "Welcome, Administrator." Who created this facility? And why are humans, thought to be extinct, now referred to as the ancient ancestors of the entire galaxy? The bright white lights of Epsilon O facility gleamed off the polished floors as Dr. Lyra Voss hurried down the main corridor. Her footsteps echoed in the sterile environment, competing with the soft hum of quantum security scanners that lined the walls. As the senior biological researcher, Lyra was accustomed to the facility's cold atmosphere. But today, something felt different. The usual predictable rhythm of the research center had been disrupted. Lyra's communication device pulsed against her wrist, displaying an urgent message that had been circulating among all senior staff for the past 15 minutes. Specimen Hawar H has left containment. What concerned her wasn't just the breach itself, but the unusual silence that followed. No alarms, no lockdown protocols, no emergency response teams rushing through the corridors. "Dr. Voss," a voice called from behind her. She turned to see Director Kale, his tall frame silhouetted against the clinical white backdrop of the hallway. The Iridian's green-tinted skin appeared almost gray under the harsh lighting. "I've been looking for you." "I was reviewing the excavation logs when I received the alert," Lyra explained, straightening her posture instinctively before her superior. "What do we know about the breach? How did Duo H exit containment without triggering any security measures?" Director Kale's four eyes blinked in succession, a sign of deep concern among his species. "That's precisely why I need you. Our systems show no malfunction, no security override, no evidence of tampering. The specimen simply walked out." "That's impossible," Lyra replied, her scientific mind already cataloging and rejecting possible explanations. "Even with the most sophisticated technology, nothing should be able to bypass our biometric locks and quantum barriers. And yet, it did." The director's voice dropped to a near whisper. "The board has called an emergency meeting, but in the meantime, they want you to directly oversee this situation. You're the only senior researcher with experience in both anomaly containment and ancient biogenetics." Lyra felt her pulse quicken. Being assigned as handler for an escaped specimen was unprecedented, especially one that had been designated with the high security prefix. "Where is it now?" "That's the other concerning factor," Director Kale said, gesturing toward the east wing. "It's been wandering through the facility, accessing rooms and corridors at will. Currently, it's in the ancient biosynthesis archives." "Has it shown any aggressive behavior?" Lyra asked, already beginning to walk in the indicated direction. "None. It appears to be exploring." The director's expression betrayed his bewilderment. "The surveillance footage shows it examining ancient artifacts, with what I can only describe as familiarity." As they approached the archives section, Lyra could see additional security personnel stationed outside the entrance, their weapons drawn, but held uncertainly at their sides. Through the transparent observation panel, she caught her first glimpse of H. The specimen stood before a display case containing what appeared to be primitive technological components. But what struck Lyra most wasn't its behavior, it was its appearance. H looked exactly like the historical records of Homo sapiens, a species believed to have vanished from the known universe approximately 50,000 years ago. Bipedal, with bare skin, except for a patch of hair on top of its head. 2 eyes, a protruding nasal structure. It matched every description from the ancient texts. "Is that a human?" she whispered, the word feeling strange on her tongue. Humans were considered ancestral myths by many species, their existence relegated to theoretical evolutionary discussions rather than historical fact. "We don't know," Director Kale replied. The preliminary genetic analysis showed some similarities to recovered Homo sapiens DNA fragments, but with significant anomalies that our systems couldn't classify. That's why it was designated as anomaly.H, rather than being categorized as a known species. Lyra watched as the specimen, the possible human, reached toward an artifact encased in preservation field. It was a small device, corroded by time, its original purpose long forgotten by the facility's researchers, despite numerous analysis attempts. "Should we intervene?" she asked, hand hovering over the door control. Before the director could respond, the specimen touched the artifact. Immediately, the preservation field flickered and dissolved. The ancient device illuminated with a soft blue glow, patterns of light emerging from its surface like awakening circuitry. Every researcher in the observation area froze as the facility's announcement system activated, a system that hadn't been used in decades. A calm, artificial voice echoed through the archives. "Welcome, Administrator. Genetic profile recognized. Homo sapiens sapiens." The specimen turned toward the observation window, its eyes meeting Lyra's with an expression she couldn't decipher. It wasn't fear or aggression. It was recognition. "Director," Lyra said, her voice barely audible, "I think we need to reconsider everything we thought we knew about this facility." Kale's upper limbs tensed. "Dr. Voss, as of this moment, you are officially assigned as handler. Find out what it is, why our systems recognize it, and most importantly, what it wants." Lyra nodded, her mind already racing with questions. If the legends were true, if humans had once dominated the galaxy, what did it mean that one was here now, awakening technology that had remained dormant for millennia? She pressed her palm against the biometric scanner. The door slid open, and she stepped forward to meet what might be the last survivor of humanity, or something else entirely. The specimen turned to face her fully. Its posture relaxed despite being surrounded by unfamiliar beings and technology. When it spoke, its voice was clear and calm, in a language that shouldn't have been understandable, yet somehow translated perfectly in Lyra's mind. "I believe," it said, holding up the now glowing device. "This belongs to my people." The encounter with Yashud H marked the beginning of a mystery that would unravel the very foundations of galactic history. As the assigned handler for Bar H, Dr. Lyra Voss found herself in the unprecedented position of escorting what appeared to be a living human through Epsilon O facility. The specimen moved with confident strides, examining the environment not with the caution of a captive, but with the curiosity of an explorer returning to familiar territory after a long absence. "My name is Lyra Voss," she said, breaking the silence as they walked down the corridor. "I've been assigned to assist you during your time here." The specimen, she couldn't bring herself to think of it merely as it any longer, turned its gaze toward her. "You can call me H," it responded, "though I suspect that's not the designation you've been using." "Ch," Lyra confirmed, surprised by its awareness. "The prefix denotes an unclassified anomaly." H nodded thoughtfully. "An appropriate classification, given the circumstances. I imagine finding one of my kind here was unexpected." "More than unexpected," Lyra admitted. "According to our records, your species hasn't been encountered in approximately 50 millennia." A flicker of emotion crossed H's features, too brief for Lyra to interpret. "And yet, here I am." They reached an intersection in the corridor, and H paused, looking down each branching pathway, with an attentiveness that suggested more than casual observation. Without hesitation, it turned toward the eastern passage, one that led to the ancient technology laboratory. "How do you know where you're going?" Lyra asked, hastening to keep pace. "I don't," H replied simply. "But this facility has a logical layout, and I can sense echoes of familiarity The laboratory doors parted automatically as they approached, another security anomaly that Lyra noted mentally. Inside, several researchers of varying species looked up from their workstations, their expressions shifting from concentration to shock at the sight of H. Dr. Aaron Mikros, the quantum technology specialist, dropped the instrument he had been calibrating. "By the elder stars," he whispered, using an expression whose origin had been lost to time. H approached a sealed containment unit, housing what appeared to be an ancient communications array. The artifact had been recovered during a deep space excavation 2 cycles ago, but despite extensive analysis, its operation remained a mystery. The corroded exterior suggested it was approximately 40,000 to 50,000 years old, dating back to what historians called the pre-diaspora era. "May I?" H asked, gesturing toward the containment field controls. Before Lyra could respond, Dr. Micro stepped forward. "That's impossible. We've tried every approach to activate it. The internal components are degraded beyond—" H placed a hand on the external scanner of the containment unit. The security system, which had previously required multiple high-level authorizations, immediately deactivated. The preservation field dissolved with a soft hum. The laboratory fell silent as H reached for the ancient device, lifting it with the careful precision of someone handling a familiar tool. Its fingers moved across the corroded surface, finding indentations and controls invisible to the researcher's previous examinations. "The problem," H explained, "isn't degradation, it's hibernation." With a series of precise manipulations, H pressed what appeared to be a specific sequence into the device's surface. The artifact responded immediately. Layers of corrosion seemed to dissolve, revealing a smooth metallic surface beneath. Blue-green light emanated from previously invisible seams, and a gentle vibration filled the air. "Impossible," Dr. Mikros whispered again, but this time with awe rather than disbelief. The ancient communication array projected a holographic display, a 3-dimensional star map that expanded to fill the center of the laboratory. Glowing markers appeared at specific coordinates, pulsing with different colors and intensities. "Navigation beacons," H explained, gesturing to the display. "This was a stellar cartography system. The markers indicate established transit routes between colonial outposts." Lyra stepped closer, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her security concerns. "Colonial outposts? You mean human settlements?" H nodded, manipulating the display to zoom in on one particular sector. This region alone contained 17 major settlements, each housing between 10 and 50 million inhabitants. A subtle melancholy tinged H's voice. At least, that was the case when this map was last updated. Dr. Mikros approached cautiously, his 4 eyes wide with fascination. "We've found ruins on some of these worlds, but nothing suggesting populations of that magnitude. How could such extensive civilizations disappear so completely?" H's expression remained unreadable. "That is a question I'd like answered as well." Lyra observed H's interaction with the technology with growing fascination. Every movement suggested an innate understanding, not the tentative exploration of someone discovering ancient artifacts, but the confident manipulation of tools designed for its use. "The system needs recalibration," H continued, making further adjustments. "Stellar drift over 50 millennia would render these coordinates inaccurate, as if responding to an unspoken command." The holographic display shifted, stars realigning into new positions. Several markers blinked and relocated, while others faded entirely. "There," H said with satisfaction. "Now it should correspond to current stellar positioning." Dr. Mikros leaned forward, comparing the updated map to modern galactic charts. "It's precisely aligned," he confirmed, unable to conceal his astonishment. "How did you—" "I simply instructed it to compensate for stellar drift based on standard algorithms," H replied. The system was designed to adapt. Lyra made careful notes on her datapad, documenting every action and response. Her scientific training demanded objectivity, but she couldn't deny the implications of what she was witnessing. If H could activate and operate technology that had remained dormant for 50,000 years, technology specifically designed for human use, it suggested a direct biological connection rather than merely shared knowledge. H, she said carefully, would you be willing to provide biological samples for analysis? It would help us understand why your security systems don't recognize me as a threat. Why the facility responds to my presence differently than yours, H interjected, deactivating the star map with a simple gesture. I think we both know the answers lie beyond mere biological samples, Dr. Voss. Before Lyra could respond, her communication device pulsed with an urgent message. The facility's board of directors was requesting an immediate report on H's activities. She glanced at the message details and felt a chill of apprehension. Specialist Talon Marov had been assigned to oversee the investigation, a researcher known for his aggressive approach to anomaly containment and his deep-seated suspicion of anything that challenged established galactic hierarchy. We need to continue this discussion elsewhere, Lyra said, gesturing toward the exit. There are others who are very interested in meeting you. H nodded, setting down the ancient communication array with careful precision. I imagine there are. But perhaps before we meet with your directors, we should visit the cellular biology laboratory. I believe it contains information that would make our subsequent conversations more productive. Lyra frowned. How do you know about the cellular biology lab? The facility layout isn't public knowledge. H's expression remained neutral, but something like amusement flickered in its eyes. As I said before, echoes of familiarity. It moved toward the exit, then paused to look back at Lyra. Coming, Doctor. As they left the laboratory, Lyra couldn't shake the sensation that she wasn't leading H through the facility at all. Rather, H was leading her toward revelations that would forever change their understanding of the past, and perhaps the future of all species in the galaxy. The Cellular Biology Laboratory occupied an entire subsection of Epsilon O's research wing, its entrance secured by multiple biometric checkpoints. As Lyra and H approached, she prepared to authorize their access through the complex security protocols. To her astonishment, the doors parted automatically before they reached the first scanner. System anomaly. The facility's central computer announced, genetic profile recognized, 100% match, administrator access granted. Lyra froze mid-stride. That's not possible, she murmured. The highest clearance in this facility belongs to Director Kale, and even he needs triple verification for this section. H continued forward with the confidence of someone returning to a familiar space. And yet, here we are. The laboratory's interior was a symphony of advanced technology. Quantum analysis chambers hummed alongside genetic sequencers, while holographic displays showed rotating molecular structures in vivid detail. Several researchers looked up from their workstations, their expressions shifting from concentration to shock as H entered. What is this specimen doing here? Demanded a tall, slender researcher with metallic implants visible along his jawline. This area is restricted to biological containment level 3 and above. Specialist Talon, Lyra acknowledged, recognizing the voice of the board's newly appointed overseer. I'm conducting an authorized investigation of H under Director Kale's supervision. Talon Marov's augmented eyes narrowed, mechanical pupils contracting to focus on H. This specimen should be in a containment chamber, not wandering freely through our most sensitive research areas. His tone carried undisguised hostility. The specimen has demonstrated no aggressive behavior, Lyra countered, and appears to possess valuable knowledge about artifacts we've been unable to decipher for decades. Knowledge is precisely what concerns me, Talon replied, stepping closer to H with clinical scrutiny. Anomalies with intelligence present the greatest threats to galactic stability. History has proven this repeatedly. H met Talon's gaze without flinching. History is often written by those with incomplete information. Specialist Merov. Talon stiffened. I don't recall providing my name. You didn't need to, H replied calmly. Your identity tag displays it clearly. Lyra noticed that H's attention had shifted beyond Talon to a secure terminal at the far end of the laboratory. Before she could intervene, H moved past Talon toward the workstation. Stop immediately, Talon ordered, reaching for the security alert on his wrist device. H paused, turning back to face them. I believe you're researching genetic markers across known species, attempting to establish evolutionary relationships, correct? The question halted Talon's motion. That information is classified. And yet, it's the primary purpose of this facility, H continued, to understand the connections between all sentient life in this sector of the galaxy, to determine why so many disparate species share certain fundamental genetic sequences, despite evolving on different worlds. Lyra stepped forward, professional curiosity overcoming her caution. How could you know that? Because it's the logical continuation of the Elder Project, H answered, the words falling into the room like stones, into still water. Talon's expression shifted from suspicion to alarm. That designation is restricted to clearance level Alpha. No unauthorized personnel should have knowledge of it. H resumed walking toward the terminal, each step deliberate. The Elder Project wasn't just about mapping genetic similarities. Specialist Merov. It was about understanding the diaspora, how a single source could branch into thousands of evolutionary paths across thousands of worlds. Reaching the terminal, H placed a palm against the authentication panel. The system responded immediately, displays illuminating with cascades of genetic data and analytical models. Access granted, administrator protocols engaged, the system announced. Accessing Elder Project Archives, Phase 2. The laboratory's main holographic display activated, projecting a massive three-dimensional model of DNA structures. Thousands of comparative analyses appeared alongside it, showing genetic sequences from hundreds of species throughout the galaxy. What you're seeing, H explained, manipulating the display with practiced ease, is the gene markers projection, a predictive model of how a single template species could evolve under various planetary conditions over approximately 50,000 years. Lyra approached the display, her scientific training allowing her to recognize the implications immediately. These are correlation matrices between existing species and something else. A common ancestor? Not just any ancestor, H replied quietly. Human genetic material. The laboratory fell silent as the implications settled over everyone present. Talon was the first to recover, his voice tight with controlled anger. This is absurd. The theory that humans seeded the galaxy was discredited centuries ago. It's a primitive myth. Nothing more. Is it? H gestured to a specific section of the display where a rotating double helix was highlighted. This sequence appears in every sentient species in this sector of the galaxy. It's often dismissed as convergent evolution, but the statistical probability of identical sequences developing independently across thousands of worlds is effectively zero. Lyra studied the sequence, her professional expertise confirming H's assessment. It's true, she admitted. We've documented this particular genetic marker in every species we've studied, but we've never been able to explain its ubiquity. Because you've been missing the original template, H said, manipulating the display again. A new genetic profile appeared, labeled simply Homo sapiens sapiens, version 0.999. Talon stepped forward, his augmented eyes scanning the data rapidly. This is fabricated. The specimen is manipulating our systems. I've altered nothing, H replied. I'm merely accessing data that already exists within your archives. Data that has been restricted from general research access. Lyra moved closer to the display, examining the human genetic profile with growing amazement. If this is accurate, it would mean humans didn't just exist. They were the progenitors of most known sentient species. That's precisely what it means. H confirmed. Approximately 50,000 years ago, human civilization reached across this spiral arm of the galaxy. They established colonies on thousands of worlds, adapting to each new environment through a combination of technology and controlled genetic modification. Impossible, Talon insisted, though his voice had lost some of its certainty. No single species could achieve such widespread colonization, even with advanced technology. Not under normal circumstances. H agreed. But the diaspora wasn't a planned expansion. It was an emergency response to an extinction-level threat. When survival is at stake, impossible becomes merely difficult. Lyra's mind raced with implications. If humans had indeed seeded the galaxy with modified versions of their own genetic material, it would explain countless evolutionary anomalies that had puzzled xenobiologists for centuries. It would mean that most sentient species weren't just distant relatives. They were direct descendants of humanity. If what you're suggesting is true, she said slowly, why has this information been restricted? This would revolutionize our understanding of galactic history. H's expression darkened. Power structures rarely survive revolutions. Dr. Voss. Some truths are inconvenient for those who benefit from the current order. Talon stepped between H and the display, his posture aggressive. I'm terminating this session immediately. The specimen is clearly attempting to subvert our research protocols and introduce false data. The data isn't false. Specialist Marov, H replied calmly. And I suspect you already knew that. Before Talon could respond, a facility-wide alert sounded, a short, pulsing tone that indicated a non-emergency notification. Director Kale's voice echoed through the laboratory. Attention research staff. The board has authorized a controlled interaction between specimen JAR H and anomaly X1 under supervised conditions. Dr. Voss and Specialist Marov are to escort the specimen to Containment Chamber 12 immediately. All other personnel are to continue their assigned duties. Talon's expression shifted to something Lyra couldn't quite interpret. Satisfaction mixed with apprehension. It seems our discussion will have to wait. Specimen. The board has other plans for you. H stepped away from the terminal, the genetic displays fading behind him. Indeed they do, though perhaps not the plans they believe. As they left the cellular biology laboratory, Lyra caught a final glimpse of the human genetic profile, slowly rotating on the display. The implications were staggering, not just for science, but for the social and political structures that had governed interspecies relations for millennia. If humans were truly the ancestors of all, what did that make H? Not just a specimen, not just an anomaly, but potentially the last living connection to the species that had shaped the entire galaxy. The revelation left Lyra with a profound sense of responsibility. Whatever happened next would determine not just H's fate, but possibly the future understanding of every sentient being's origins. And based on Talon's reaction, some powerful entities were determined to ensure that understanding remained buried. Containment Chamber 12 was located in the deepest level of Epsilon O facility, accessible only through a series of high-security elevators and decontamination chambers. As Lyra, H, and Talon descended in the primary elevator, the atmosphere grew tense with unspoken implications. Anomaly X1 has killed 17 researchers since its capture, Talon stated, his tone casual despite the gravity of his words. It's resistant to all known sedatives and restraint technologies. Even our most experienced handlers can't approach without triggering aggressive responses. Lyra glanced at H, concerned by this unexpected development. Why would the board authorize an interaction between H and such a dangerous anomaly? This violates all standard protocols. Scientific inquiry requires risks. Dr. Voss, Talon replied with a thin smile. The board is interested in how different anomalies respond to each other. It could provide valuable insights. H remained silent, its posture relaxed despite the obvious danger they were approaching. When the elevator reached the lowest level, the doors opened to reveal a heavily reinforced corridor lined with armed security personnel. At its end stood Captain Ren Zolak, head of Epsilon O's security division, his biomechanical limbs gleaming under the harsh lighting. Dr. Voss, Specialist Marov, Zolak acknowledged with a curt nod. His gaze lingered on H, mechanical eyes, whirring as they adjusted focus. Is the specimen aware of interaction protocols? H understands speech and appears to comprehend complex concepts, Lyra explained. However, I must register my formal objection to this interaction. We have insufficient data on both entities to predict outcomes safely. Captain Zolak's expression remained impassive. Objection noted. Doctor. However, the board's authorization overrides standard safety protocols. We've prepared a full containment response in case of emergency. He gestured to the teams of armed personnel positioned strategically along the corridor. As they approached the final security checkpoint, H spoke for the first time since leaving the cellular biology laboratory. What can you tell me about X1, Captain? Zolak seemed momentarily surprised by the direct address, but recovered quickly. Xenobiological anomaly, discovered during excavation of ruins on Proxima Centauri 4, morphologically similar to large predatory species, but with significant deviations from any known evolutionary pattern. Highly aggressive, particularly toward researcher species. And you've attempted to feed it? H asked. The question caught everyone by surprise. Zolak frowned. Of course. Standard nutritional supplements based on molecular analysis of its tissue samples. But not actual food, H clarified. Not sustenance appropriate to its specific biology. Talon interjected impatiently. We've tried every possible dietary combination our xenobiologists could devise. The creature rejects everything. H nodded thoughtfully. I see. They reached the observation area, adjacent to Containment Chamber 12. Through reinforced, transparent barriers, Lyra could see Anomaly X1 for the first time. The creature was massive, at least 3 meters tall when standing upright, though currently it was crouched in a defensive posture. Its body combined elements that reminded her of reptilian and mammalian species, with iridescent scales covering powerful musculature. Multiple eyes were positioned around a skull that featured both a prominent jaw structure and sensory appendages that twitched constantly, scanning its environment. Magnificent, H murmured, approaching the barrier without hesitation. Careful, Zolak warned. It can sense movement through the barrier and often charges in response. As if on cue, X1 shifted its attention toward the observation area, its multiple eyes focused, pupils dilating as it registered their presence. But instead of the aggressive charge Zolak had predicted, the creature went completely still, its attention fixed specifically on H. Interesting, Talon noted, recording the interaction on his datapad. It appears to recognize something about the human specimen. Not recognition, H corrected. Familiarity. There's a difference. Turning to Zolak, H asked, Is there a feeding mechanism? A way to deliver sustenance into the chamber? Captain Zolak pointed to a small airlock system built into the wall. Delivery port. But as Specialist Marov mentioned, it rejects all food sources. May I? H gestured toward a nearby supply station where various nutritional packages were stored. Lyra exchanged glances with Zolak, who hesitated before nodding his approval. H selected several packages, examining their contents before choosing one, specifically. This should be appropriate, H said, approaching the delivery port. If you'll allow me to demonstrate. Talon moved to block the way. The specimen is not authorized to interact directly with X1. Observation only was specified in the board's instructions. Lyra stepped forward. The board authorized an interaction between H and X1. They didn't specify limitations on that interaction. She turned to H. What do you intend to do? Feed it, H replied simply. X1 is hungry, that's all. Its aggression stems from prolonged nutritional stress combined with confinement anxiety. Talon scoffed. That's an absurd oversimplification. X1 has demonstrated complex hostile behaviors that can't be reduced to mere hunger. Perhaps, H acknowledged. But it seems a simple hypothesis to test. After a moment's consideration, Lyra nodded to Captain Zolak. Allow the interaction. Security teams should remain on high alert. But let's see what happens. Zolak gave the authorization, and H approached the delivery port, placing the nutritional package inside. H activated the system that would transport it into the containment chamber. All eyes turned to the observation window as the package appeared on the other side. X1's reaction was immediate and unexpected. Rather than ignoring the package as it had with all previous feeding attempts, the creature approached cautiously. Its sensory appendages extended toward the offering. With surprising delicacy for its size, X1 lifted the package, examining it before tearing it open with specialized claws. The chamber fell silent as X1 consumed the contents with evident satisfaction, producing a low, rumbling sound that reverberated through the observation area. It's purring, Lyra said in disbelief. Not exactly, H explained. It's a satisfaction vocalization, similar to purring but serving a different communicative function. It's expressing contentment and, more importantly, acknowledging the provider of sustenance. As if to confirm this assessment, X1 approached the barrier separating it from the observation area. Instead of the aggressive charging behavior documented in previous encounters, the creature pressed one of its sensory appendages against the transparent surface directly opposite where H stood. It's recognizing you specifically, Zolak observed, his mechanical eyes whirring as they recorded the unprecedented behavior. Not me, H corrected. My genetic signature. X1 isn't actually an anomaly in the way you've classified it. It's a genetically modified guardian species, created to protect human colonial outposts from indigenous predators. Talon's expression darkened. That's impossible. X1 predates human existence according to our archaeological dating. Your dating methods assume X1 evolved naturally, H replied, maintaining eye contact with the creature on the other side of the barrier. It didn't. It was engineered specifically to bond with human genetic signatures and respond to human command patterns. To demonstrate, H raised a hand in a specific gesture. X1 immediately mirrored the movement, raising one of its front limbs in perfect synchronization. Remarkable, Lyra whispered, documenting the interaction on her datapad. It's responding to silent commands. Pheromonal and visual cues, H explained. The guardian species was designed to operate in environments where verbal communication might be compromised. They recognize human genetic signatures through specialized olfactory receptors and respond to specific gestural commands. Talon's skepticism had given way to cold calculation. If what you're suggesting is true, it would mean X1 is not a naturally evolved species, but a created weapon, one programmed to respond exclusively to human control. Not a weapon, H corrected firmly. A companion species, designed for protection and cooperation, not destruction. The distinction seemed lost on Talon, whose focus had narrowed to the implications for power dynamics. Either way, it confirms that humans possess technology far beyond what we previously attributed to them. Technology that could be weaponized. Lyra observed the gentle interaction between H and X1 with growing fascination. Or technology that could help us better understand dozens of so-called anomalies currently contained in this facility. If X1 is a guardian species rather than a random evolutionary outlier. How many other specimens might we have misclassified? H performed another series of gestures, and X1 responded by sitting back on its haunches. Sensory appendages relaxed in a non-alert state. Most of them, I suspect, what you classify as anomalies, are likely specialized species created for specific environments or purposes during the human diaspora. Captain Zolak, who had been silently observing the interaction, finally spoke. If these creatures respond to human genetic signatures, and if, as you claimed earlier, all current sentient species carry elements of human DNA, why do they react aggressively to us, but peacefully to you? Dilution, H explained. The guardian species were engineered to recognize pure human genetic signatures. While your species may carry human genetic markers, they've been modified and diluted through evolutionary adaptation to different environments. The recognition receptors in X1 can detect the difference. The implications hung in the air, unspoken but profound. H wasn't just similar to ancient humans, according to this explanation. H was a pure human, unmodified by the genetic adaptation that had transformed humanity's descendants into the diverse species that now populated the galaxy. Lyra's scientific mind raced with questions, but before she could voice them, her communication device signaled an incoming message from Director Kale. The text was brief, but urgent. Bring H to the structural mapping chamber immediately. New developments require board oversight. She glanced up to find Talon studying her intently. New instructions? He asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. Director Kale wants us to proceed to the structural mapping chamber, she confirmed, unable to hide her surprise at the request. The mapping chamber housed the facility's most comprehensive architectural and navigational systems. Systems that documented not just Epsilon O's current configuration, but its original design specifications. Perfect timing, Talon said with a thin smile. I believe our demonstration here has concluded successfully. He turned to H. If you'll come with us, specimen, there's more to show you. As they left the containment area, Lyra noticed X1 tracking H's movement. Its sensory appendages extended in what appeared to be a gesture of farewell. The creature that had killed 17 researchers had been transformed into something almost docile through nothing more than H's presence and a simple feeding interaction. If H could establish such rapport with one anomaly, what might happen if it encountered others? And more importantly, what would the board do with this knowledge? The implications troubled Lyra deeply as they made their way toward the structural mapping chamber, where she suspected even greater revelations awaited. The structural mapping chamber occupied a central position in Epsilon O facility. Its circular design, featuring curved walls embedded with holographic projectors and data terminals. As Lyra, H, and Talon entered, they found Director Kale already waiting, along with several board members whose presence at the operational level was unusual enough to signal the gravity of the situation. Dr. Voss, Director Kale acknowledged, his 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession, a sign of agitation among Iridians. The board has been monitoring your progress with Bao H. The interaction with X1 was unexpected. Unexpected, but informative, Lyra replied carefully, aware of the political undercurrents. H has demonstrated an ability to communicate with X1 in ways our research team couldn't achieve in 3 years of containment. Yes, we observed, said a Quintillion board member, her exoskeleton clicking softly as she moved forward. The specimen appears to possess unique capabilities regarding our contained anomalies. H remained silent, surveying the chamber with the same careful attention it had shown throughout the facility. Lyra noticed its gaze lingering on what appeared to be an unremarkable section of wall, a smooth panel without visible controls or distinguishing features. We've brought you here, Director Kale continued, addressing H directly, Because our systems have detected unusual activity throughout the facility, coinciding with your movements. Security protocols that have remained dormant for decades have been activating in your presence. Not activating, H corrected quietly. Responding. Talon stepped forward, his posture aggressive. Responding to what? Exactly? What are you doing to our systems? I'm not doing anything to them, H replied. They're recognizing me, just as X1 did. This facility wasn't built by your alliance, Specialist Merov. It was constructed by humans, approximately 50,000 years ago. The statement hung in the air, its implications rippling through the assembled officials. Director Kale was the first to recover. That's impossible. Epsilon O was established by the Interstellar Research Alliance 3 centuries ago, after the discovery of the Tong Sun excavation site. You discovered it, H agreed. But you didn't build it. You found an existing structure and repurposed it, adapting what technology you could understand and sealing off the rest. Without waiting for a response, H walked directly to the unremarkable wall panel that had caught its attention earlier. Placing a palm against the smooth surface, H pressed in a specific pattern. The panel, which had appeared solid moments before, suddenly illuminated with a network of intricate circuitry patterns glowing beneath the surface. System access recognized, announced an artificial voice that differed from the facility's standard operational system. Administrator authentication confirmed, revealing archival repository access. Before the astonished eyes of everyone present, the wall panel became transparent, revealing a hidden corridor extending deep into areas of the facility that weren't represented on any official schematics. By the elder stars, Director Kale whispered, unconsciously echoing the same ancient expression Dr. Micros had used earlier. H turned back to face them, standing at the threshold of the newly revealed passage. This is the archival repository, what you might call the true heart of Epsilon O. It contains the complete records of the human diaspora, including genetic templates, colonial manifests, and technological specifications for all systems deployed during the emergency evacuation. Lyra approached cautiously, her scientific curiosity overcoming institutional caution. How did you know this was here? I didn't exactly, H admitted. But I recognize the access panel design. It's standard for secure repositories and facilities of this era. Talon pushed forward, positioning himself between H and the facility officials. This is clearly an attempt to access restricted areas and compromise facility security. The specimen should be contained immediately while we investigate this apparent breach. It's not a breach, Specialist Merov, H replied calmly. It's a homecoming. Without waiting for permission, H stepped through the threshold into the hidden corridor. After a moment's hesitation, Lyra followed, her decision made instinctively rather than logically. Behind her, she heard Director Kale ordering security personnel to maintain positions while the board members debated the appropriate response. The hidden corridor descended at a gentle angle, illuminating automatically as they progressed. Unlike the clinical white aesthetics of the rest of Epsilon O, this passage featured warm amber lighting and walls embedded with what appeared to be data storage crystals that glowed with soft blue luminescence. What is this place, really? Lyra asked, as they descended deeper into the unknown section. It's exactly what I said, an archival repository, H replied. One of several established throughout the galaxy before the final diaspora phase. They were designed to preserve human knowledge and genetic patterns in case the evacuation failed. Evacuation from what? Lyra pressed. What could threaten a species advanced enough to spread across thousands of worlds? H's expression darkened. Something we created ourselves. Ironically, a quantum field experiment that destabilized space-time in our home system. When containment failed, we had hours, not days, to implement emergency protocols. Millions were evacuated to colonial outposts, but billions remained behind. The weight of this revelation settled over Lyra as they reached the bottom of the passage, emerging into a vast circular chamber, unlike anything she had seen in the known sections of Epsilon O. The ceiling arched high above them, embedded with a perfect representation of the galaxy that slowly rotated. Certain stars and systems highlighted with pulsing markers. At the chamber's center stood a raised platform surrounded by control interfaces that illuminated as H approached. The design aesthetic was both familiar and alien, recognizable as technology, but with an organic fluidity that differed from the angular precision of current Alliance engineering. "This is the primary archive," H explained, stepping onto the platform. From here, administrators could access the complete records of all diaspora activities, monitor colony development, and track evolutionary adaptations in real time. Lyra followed, marveling at the preserved technology. "How is this still operational after 50,000 years?" "Quantum crystal storage doesn't degrade," H replied, activating the central interface with a series of precise gestures. And the power systems were designed for multi-millennial operation using background radiation conversion. The interface responded to H's commands, projecting a three-dimensional display that filled the chamber with cascading data streams and images. Lyra recognized genetic sequences, planetary surveys, and what appeared to be detailed evolutionary projections for hundreds of distinct species, all branching from a common human template. "Project Elder Genesis," H said, indicating the primary data stream. "The controlled adaptation of human genetic material to survive and thrive in diverse planetary environments." Lyra approached one particular projection, showing the evolutionary path from baseline human to what was unmistakably an Iridian lineage. "This confirms what you said in the biology lab. Humans didn't just seed the galaxy, they transformed themselves to inhabit it. Necessity demanded adaptation," H confirmed. "Environments too hostile for unmodified humans required genetic alterations, over generations. Those alterations became more pronounced as natural selection reinforced beneficial mutations and eliminated others." Before Lyra could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from the passage behind them. Talon emerged, followed by Captain Zolak and several security personnel, their weapons drawn. "Step away from the controls," Talon ordered, his voice cold with authority. "This area is now under security containment protocols." H continued manipulating the interface, seemingly unconcerned by the threat. "You don't have authority here. Specialist Merov. This chamber doesn't recognize Alliance security protocols." "I don't need system recognition to enforce containment," Talon replied, signaling to the security team to advance. "Captain Zolak, secure the specimen and escort Dr. Voss back to the main facility." Captain Zolak hesitated, his enhanced eyes scanning the chamber and the active displays. "Sir, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures throughout this area. Standard containment procedures may not be effective in this environment." "Implement them anyway," Talon snapped. "That's an order." As the security team moved forward, H activated a final sequence on the central interface. The chamber's lighting shifted to a deeper amber hue, and a soft vibration permeated the floor. "Emergency protocol initiated," announced the same artificial voice they had heard at the hidden entrance. "Archival preservation measures engaged. Non-administrator personnel will be restricted from accessing critical systems." Transparent energy barriers materialized between H and Lyra and the advancing security team, halting their progress. Talon struck the barrier with his fist, but it remained solid despite the impact. "What have you done?" he demanded, his composure finally cracking to reveal genuine alarm. "I've activated the archive's defensive protocols," H explained calmly. "They're designed to protect the repository in case of unauthorized access attempts." Lyra glanced between H and the security team, understanding the dangerous precipice they now stood upon. H. We need to de-escalate this situation. The facility staff aren't enemies. They're researchers trying to understand their own history. Some are, H agreed, looking pointedly at Talon. Others have different priorities. Isn't that right, Specialist Marov? You've known about the human origin theory for years, but you've been systematically removing evidence from research access, haven't you? Talon's expression confirmed the accusation before he could compose a denial. Theoretical origins are irrelevant to current galactic stability. The Alliance functions because each species believes in its own sovereign evolution. Introducing the concept of a creator species would destabilize centuries of diplomatic balance. Even if that concept is scientifically accurate, Lyra challenged, her professional integrity flaring at the implication of suppressed research. Especially then, Talon replied without hesitation. Some truths are too disruptive to be widely known. H manipulated the interface again, bringing up what appeared to be security footage from various sections of Epsilon O. The images showed research staff systematically altering data, removing specific genetic markers from analysis results, and restricting access to artifacts that showed clear human origin. You haven't just been hiding the truth, H said, addressing Talon directly. You've been actively destroying evidence. Why? What benefit does your faction gain from erasing human legacy? Talon's augmented eyes narrowed. My faction, as you call it, understands that power derives from perceived legitimacy. If the ruling species of the Alliance discovered they were artificially created, engineered by humans, rather than naturally evolved, it would undermine the entire basis of their authority. So this is about maintaining political control, Lyra concluded, the pieces falling into place. Preserving the current power structure by hiding the common origin of all species. It's about preventing chaos, Talon insisted. Do you understand what would happen if this information became public? Centuries of interspecies relations built on mutual respect would collapse overnight. Religious systems, cultural identities, hierarchical structures, all would be called into question simultaneously. H regarded Talon with something approaching pity. You're afraid that knowing the truth about their origins would make people feel less special, less significant. Wouldn't it? Talon challenged. No, H replied simply. Understanding that all sentient species share a common ancestor doesn't diminish their uniqueness. It connects them. What you see as a threat to hierarchy, I see as an opportunity for unity. Before Talon could respond, the facility's emergency alert system activated, not the controlled tone they had heard earlier, but a piercing alarm indicating critical security breach. Captain Zolak's communication device activated automatically. Security override initiated in Containment Section Alpha, reported an urgent voice. Multiple anomalies have been released from primary containment. Emergency protocols failing. Request immediate assistance. Talon's expression shifted from anger to shock. That's impossible. Security overrides require board-level authorization, or they require someone with sufficient system access to bypass normal protocols, H suggested, bringing up new security footage on the archives display. The images showed containment chambers throughout the facility opening systematically, releasing the various anomalies that had been kept in isolation for decades. Did you do this? Talon demanded, his voice rising with barely controlled fury. No, H replied, studying the footage with a frown. But someone with administrative access did. Lyra noticed a detail in the corner of the security footage, a timestamp and authorization code. That's your access signature, Specialist Marov. According to the system, you initiated the override. That's preposterous, Talon sputtered. I've been here the entire time. Your credentials were used, H corrected, enlarging the authorization detail. Someone has compromised your access codes. Captain Zolak turned to Talon, his professional demeanor cracking under the weight of the emergency. Sir, we need to respond to the containment breach immediately. The entire research staff is at risk. Talon hesitated, clearly torn between maintaining his position against H and addressing the facility-wide crisis. Finally, practicality won out. "Secure this chamber. No one enters or exits until I return." He turned and sprinted back up the passage, followed by most of the security team. Captain Zolak remained behind with 2 officers, his augmented eyes fixed on H with newfound uncertainty. "If you didn't cause this breach, who did? And why use Specialist Merov's credentials specifically?" "Someone who wants to create chaos while directing blame elsewhere," H suggested. "Someone who understood that releasing the anomalies would force an evacuation, potentially allowing them to destroy evidence in the confusion." Lyra's mind raced ahead to the logical conclusion. The archive. If someone wanted to permanently erase the human legacy evidence, this would be the perfect opportunity. H nodded grimly. "Exactly. And I suspect they'll be coming here next." As if confirming this assessment, the chamber's secure entrance registered an unauthorized access attempt. The energy barriers that had prevented Talon's team from advancing flickered momentarily as external systems attempted to override the archive's independent security protocols. "They're trying to hack the door," Captain Zolak observed, positioning his officers defensively. "Standard Alliance override sequences." H returned to the central interface, fingers dancing across the controls with increasing urgency. "They won't succeed, but they don't need to. If they can't access the archive to destroy it directly, they'll likely attempt to collapse this entire section of the facility." "We need to get to the control center," Lyra said, her scientific caution giving way to decisive action. "From there, we can implement facility-wide containment protocols and identify who's behind this." H nodded in agreement. "The archive has an emergency exit that connects directly to the central facility systems. Activating a specific sequence, H caused a section of the chamber's wall to reconfigure, revealing a narrow passage. This maintenance tunnel was designed for administrators to access critical systems during emergencies. Captain Zolak eyed the passage skeptically. "How do I know this isn't leading us into another trap?" "You don't," H acknowledged. "But staying here means being trapped when they eventually breach the outer door. At least this way, we have a chance to reach the control center and stop whoever is behind the containment breach." After a moment's consideration, Zolak nodded grimly. "Lead the way. But understand this. If I detect any indication that you're responsible for this situation, I won't hesitate to implement lethal containment protocols." "Noted," H replied calmly, gesturing toward the passage. "Dr. Voss, you should remain here where it's safe. The archive's defenses will protect you until we resolve the situation." Lyra straightened her posture, professional dignity asserting itself. "I'm your assigned handler. H, where you go, I go. Besides, you'll need someone with active facility credentials to access certain systems." H studied her for a moment before nodding in acceptance. "Stay close. The maintenance tunnels can be disorienting if you're unfamiliar with their layout." As they entered the narrow passage, the sounds of the attempted breach at the archive's main entrance faded behind them. Ahead lay uncertainty, a facility in chaos, anomalies roaming free, and a hidden adversary working to destroy evidence of humanity's legacy in the galaxy. Lyra felt a profound sense that whatever happened next would determine not just their immediate survival, but the future understanding of all sentient species' origins. The truth about humanity's role as the progenitor of galactic life hung in the balance, and she was one of the few now positioned to preserve it. With renewed determination, she followed H deeper into the heart of Epsilon O, ready to confront whatever awaited them in the control center, and whatever revelations might follow. The maintenance tunnel twisted through the forgotten infrastructure of Epsilon O, illuminating with soft amber light as they progressed. Unlike the pristine corridors of the research facility, these passages showed signs of age, not decay, but the patina of millennia carefully preserved by automated maintenance systems. Lyra noticed intricate symbols etched into the walls at regular intervals, reminiscent of the markers on the ancient communication array H had activated earlier. "These are navigation markers," H explained, noticing her interest. "They indicate which facility systems the tunnels connect to. We're currently moving toward the central processing hub, what your people call the control center." Captain Zolak moved with the heightened awareness of a trained security professional, his augmented senses scanning continuously for threats. "How much farther?" he asked, the mechanical components in his voice modulator betraying tension. "Not far," H replied. The original design placed administrative access points within emergency response timeframes of critical systems. As they rounded a curve in the tunnel, distant sounds of chaos reached them: alarms, shouting, and the distinctive low-frequency vocalizations of released anomalies. The facility's emergency had clearly escalated during their journey through the hidden passage. "We need to hurry," Lyra urged, her concern for colleagues throughout the facility mounting. If the anomalies reach the research levels, the casualty count could be catastrophic. H increased pace in response, leading them to what appeared to be a dead end. Without hesitation, H placed a palm against a seemingly solid section of wall. The surface responded immediately, molecular structure reconfiguring to create an opening directly into what Lyra recognized as a maintenance alcove, adjacent to the control center. "Remarkable," she murmured. "The entire facility is more responsive than we ever realized." "It was designed to be intuitive for human operators," H explained, peering cautiously into the main corridor. "Your alliance has been using only its most basic functions." The corridor outside the alcove was mercifully empty, though emergency lighting indicated the facility remained in crisis mode. They moved quickly toward the control center's main entrance, where they found signs of a recent struggle, equipment scattered across the floor, and security barriers partially activated. Captain Zolak held up a hand, signaling for caution. "Something's wrong. Where are the security teams? The control center should be the most heavily defended position during a containment breach." H studied the entrance with narrowed eyes. "They were here, but they've been redirected. Look at the override logs." H pointed to a security terminal, displaying recent command authorizations. "Someone with high-level access ordered all security personnel to the lower levels 10 minutes ago, leaving the control center vulnerable," Lyra concluded. "Exactly as you predicted." They approached the main doors cautiously. Despite the facility-wide emergency, the control center's security remained active, requiring appropriate authorization for entry. Lyra pressed her palm against the authentication panel, providing her senior researcher credentials. The system processed her identity, but instead of granting immediate access, it displayed an unusual message. "Secondary authentication required. Human genetic verification pending." H stepped forward without hesitation, placing a hand beside Lyra's on the panel. The system responded immediately. "Human genetic profile confirmed. Administrator access granted." The massive doors slid open, revealing the control center, a vast circular chamber dominated by holographic displays showing real-time data from throughout the facility. At the chamber's center stood a raised platform with the primary control interface, currently occupied by a figure Lyra recognized with a shock of betrayal. "Director Kale," she gasped. The Iridian turned at their entrance, his four eyes widening in evident surprise. "Dr. Voss, you shouldn't be here." His gaze shifted to H, narrowing with calculation. "And you definitely shouldn't be here. Specimen." Captain Zolak stepped forward, his security training asserting itself despite his confusion. "Director, what's happening? Where are the security teams assigned to protect the control center?" "Dealing with the containment breach, Captain," Kale replied smoothly. "I ordered all available personnel to prioritize protecting research staff and securing escaped anomalies. While leaving the facility's nerve center undefended, Zolak questioned, his mechanical eyes scanning the room and noting the absence of even basic security protocols. That violates every emergency procedure in our operational guidelines. H moved toward one of the secondary terminals, studying the display with growing concern. He left it undefended because he doesn't want it protected. Captain, look at the active processes. Lyra followed H's indication, her scientific training allowing her to interpret the complex data streams. What she saw sent a chill through her core. System purge procedures. You're deleting the archive data. Kale's posture shifted subtly, abandoning the pretense of normal operations. Not deleting, Dr. Voss. Protecting. The information in that archive would destabilize the entire Alliance if released publicly. So you're working with Talon, Lyra concluded, pieces falling into place. The containment breach, the redirection of security. It was all to create an opportunity to erase the human legacy evidence. Specialist Marov is a valuable ally who understands the bigger picture, Kale confirmed. But he lacks the authority to implement necessary measures. As a board member, I have that authority. H continued working at the terminal, fingers moving across the interface with increasing urgency. You're not just purging data. You've initiated a structural integrity collapse in the archive section. You're trying to bury it completely. A regrettable necessity, Kale replied, his tone coldly pragmatic. Some secrets are too dangerous to preserve, even in restricted access. Captain Zolak raised his weapon, professional loyalty finally giving way to moral clarity. Director Kale, I'm relieving you of command under Emergency Protocol 9. Step away from the control interface immediately. Kale regarded the security chief with something approaching pity. Your augmentations were manufactured in Alliance facilities, weren't they, Captain? Using proprietary quantum integration techniques? Zolak frowned, momentarily confused by the apparent non sequitur. What does that have to do with... Before he could complete the question, Kale activated a specific sequence on the control interface. Immediately, Captain Zolak's augmented limbs seized up, his weapon clattering to the floor as his mechanical systems failed to respond to neural commands. Emergency override, Kale explained calmly. All Alliance augmentation technology includes security protocols to prevent use against authorized officials, a necessary precaution in our position. Lyra moved to assist the paralyzed security chief, but Kale's voice stopped her. I wouldn't, Dr. Voss. The override affects anyone who interferes with the subject. H had continued working at the secondary terminal throughout this exchange, apparently focused on counteracting the archive destruction protocols. Without looking up, H addressed Kale directly. You believe erasing humanity's legacy will preserve the current power structure, but you're destroying something far more valuable than political stability. And what would that be, specimen? Kale asked, genuine curiosity mixing with dismissive confidence. The truth about connection, H replied, finally looking up from the terminal. The knowledge that despite apparent differences, all sentient species in this sector share a common origin, a common heritage that could unite rather than divide. Kale scoffed. Idealistic nonsense. Unity through shared heritage? The moment the ruling species discover they were engineered rather than naturally evolved, they'll tear each other apart fighting over which adaptation was superior, according to the original human designers. Is that what you fear, Director? Lyra challenged, edging closer to the primary control platform. Or do you fear losing your own position in the hierarchy once the truth emerges? My position is irrelevant, Kale insisted, though his upper limbs tensed defensively. I'm protecting billions from a truth they aren't prepared to accept. H had returned to the terminal, implementing a series of commands with increasing confidence. You're nearly out of time to make that decision, Director. I've managed to halt the archive destruction sequence, and I've activated an emergency broadcast protocol. Alarm flashed across Kale's features. "What broadcast? What have you done?" "I've initiated the Elder Reconciliation Protocol," H explained. "A contingency program designed to activate when descendants of humanity reached a specific technological threshold. It's transmitting the truth about human origins to every connected system in the facility and beyond." "Impossible," Kale hissed, his composure finally cracking. "Our firewalls would prevent any unauthorized transmission." "Your firewalls are built on human technology," H replied simply. "The facility recognized me as an administrator the moment I arrived. I'm not hacking your systems, Director. I'm using access that was always intended for human survivors." As if confirming this claim, the control center's primary displays suddenly shifted, emergency protocols giving way to a comprehensive data stream from the archive. Genetic sequences, evolutionary pathways, and historical records flowed across every screen, the information organizing itself into clear, undeniable evidence of humanity's role as the progenitor species. "You've doomed us all," Kale whispered, staring at the displays with mounting horror. "No," H countered, stepping onto the control platform to face Kale directly. "I've liberated you from a lie. The question now is whether you'll continue fighting to preserve that lie, or help shape a new understanding based on truth." Before Kale could respond, the control center doors slid open again. Talon stood in the entrance, his expression shifting from determination to shock as he took in the scene before him, the activated displays. Captain Zolak immobilized, and H standing confidently on the control platform. "You're too late, Specialist Merov," H said calmly. "The archive data is being transmitted throughout the facility and to connected alliance networks. The truth about human origins will be known, regardless of what happens here." Talon's augmented eyes scanned the displays rapidly, assessing the situation with clinical precision. His gaze eventually settled on Director Kale. "You initiated the containment breach using my credentials. You compromised facility security and endangered countless research staff, all to create a diversion." "Necessary sacrifices," Kale replied, though his conviction seemed to be wavering in the face of Talon's evident betrayal. "You understood the importance of maintaining secrecy about human origins. We discussed the risks extensively." "I advocated for controlled information management," Talon corrected sharply. "Not sabotage and endangerment of Alliance personnel. There's a difference between restricting access to sensitive historical data and deliberately causing a catastrophic security breach." The revelation of this apparent rift between conspirators gave Lyra an opening. Moving quickly to one of the secondary terminals, she began implementing emergency containment protocols to address the facility-wide crisis. "The anomalies are still loose throughout the facility," she announced, bringing up security footage of various sections where creatures like X1 roamed freely. "Whatever your ideological positions, we need to secure the facility before anyone else is harmed." H joined her at the terminal, adding additional commands with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the systems. "I can help with that. Most of the anomalies will respond to specific command protocols embedded in their genetic programming." On the primary control platform, Kale made a final, desperate attempt to maintain control. "This changes nothing. Even if the information is released, the Alliance leadership will classify it as a security threat. They'll suppress it just as we have, but more thoroughly and with greater resources." "Perhaps," H acknowledged. "But they'll be making that decision with full knowledge, not in ignorance manipulated by a few like you." As H implemented a facility-wide command signal, something remarkable appeared on the security displays. Throughout Epsilon O, the released anomalies, creatures that had been regarded as unpredictable and dangerous for decades, began responding to the signal. Rather than continuing their chaotic movements, they settled into orderly patterns, many returning voluntarily to their containment areas. "What are you doing to them?" Talon asked, his scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming his political concerns. "I'm not controlling them," H explained. "I'm communicating with them. Most of these species were designed with specific response patterns encoded in their genetics, patterns activated by human command sequences. They're not mindless beasts. They're sophisticated guardian and companion species that have been treated as monsters because no one understood their true nature." On the displays, X1 could be seen guiding smaller anomalies back toward containment areas. Its behavior shifted from predatory to protective. Other creatures were assisting injured research staff, their actions clearly deliberate and compassionate rather than aggressive. "They're helping," Lyra observed in amazement. "All this time, we thought they were inherently dangerous, but they were just responding to their environment and our treatment of them." Captain Zolak, whose augmentations had begun to respond again as Kale's override weakened, managed to speak through partially restored systems. "If the specimen, if H, can control these creatures, then everything changes. Our entire security approach has been based on false assumptions." Kale, seeing his position weakening by the moment, made a final, desperate move. "This changes nothing. Human manipulation of genetics doesn't make them our creators or our masters. We've evolved far beyond their original designs. We are not beholden to their legacy." "No one is claiming mastery," H replied calmly. "Sharing a common ancestor doesn't create hierarchy. It creates connection. Your species aren't lesser because they originated from human genetic templates. If anything, the adaptations that allowed you to thrive on worlds humans couldn't inhabit in their original form demonstrate evolutionary superiority." This perspective, so different from the domination Kale had feared, seemed to momentarily confuse the director. "You're not claiming authority over Alliance species." "Why would I?" H asked simply. "I'm possibly the last unmodified human in existence. My role isn't to rule, but to reconnect, to help preserve knowledge that belongs to all descendants of humanity. Not just me." As H spoke, the facility's emergency systems began reporting containment restoration throughout Epsilon O. The crisis was subsiding as quickly as it had erupted, with minimal casualties and largely through the cooperative behavior of the previously feared anomalies. Talon approached the control platform cautiously, his focus now on H rather than Director Kale. "If what you're saying is true, if humans were truly the progenitors of all Alliance species, what happens now? What do you expect us to do with this information?" "That's not for me to dictate," H replied. "But I would suggest beginning with truth rather than suppression. Establish a joint research initiative to study the archive data properly. Let representatives from all species examine the evidence and determine collectively how to integrate this knowledge into your understanding of galactic history." Lyra, seeing an opportunity to bridge the ideological divide, stepped forward. "I could lead such an initiative, with expertise from both traditional research methodologies and H's direct knowledge. We could develop a comprehensive, balanced approach to the human legacy question." Captain Zolak, now regaining more control of his augmented systems, managed to stand. "I would support this approach. As head of security, I can testify that the methods of suppression have clearly failed and created more dangers than they prevented." Director Kale, recognizing the shifting consensus, finally relented. "The board will need to vote on any official change in facility mandate, but given the circumstances and the fact that the information is already being transmitted," he sighed, 4 eyes blinking in succession, "perhaps a controlled research initiative is the best remaining option. It's the only option that preserves both truth and stability," H confirmed. Continuing to hide humanity's legacy would only lead to more desperate measures and greater risks. As the immediate crisis subsided, Lyra felt a profound sense of standing at a historical inflection point. The knowledge contained in the archive would transform understanding throughout the Alliance. challenging long-held beliefs, but also offering new possibilities for connection between species that had previously seen themselves as fundamentally different. H moved to the primary control interface, implementing final containment protocols with the natural authority of someone who understood the facility at its deepest level. As the displays confirmed successful restoration of security throughout Epsilon, H turned to address them all. This facility wasn't built to contain anomalies, H explained. It was designed as a repository of knowledge and a beacon for human survivors. What you've been calling anomalies are actually guardian species and adaptive biological systems created to protect and preserve that legacy until humanity could reclaim it. And now? Talon asked, his scientific mind already calculating implications. Are you claiming ownership of this facility and its contents? No, H replied without hesitation. I'm proposing partnership. The knowledge here belongs to all descendants of humanity, which includes every Alliance species. My role isn't to control that knowledge, but to help interpret it correctly. As the immediate crisis subsided, and emergency systems throughout Epsilon Osh reported successful containment restoration, a new chapter began to unfold, one that would redefine not just the facility's purpose, but the understanding of all sentient species' origins in the galaxy. The transformation of Epsilon O from a containment facility to a center for heritage research began immediately following the crisis. Under Lyra's leadership, with H serving as consultant rather than commander, the hidden archive was fully integrated with the facility's existing research infrastructure. The board, recognizing the inevitability of the situation after the widespread data transmission, voted to establish the Interspecies Heritage Council, a collaborative body representing all major Alliance species. In the weeks that followed, Epsilon O hummed with renewed purpose. Research teams that had once focused on containing and studying anomalies now worked to understand and communicate with guardian species. The creatures, responding to proper interaction protocols, demonstrated intelligence and abilities far beyond what had previously been documented. In the newly designated Heritage Conference Chamber, converted from what had been Director Kale's administrative section, Lyra addressed assembled representatives from throughout the Alliance. H stood nearby, a quiet presence whose significance couldn't be overstated. What we've discovered in the archive confirms that humanity didn't simply disappear 50,000 years ago, Lyra explained, presenting holographic evidence drawn from the repository. Faced with an extinction-level event in their home system, they implemented an emergency diaspora protocol, spreading modified versions of their genetic material across thousands of worlds. A Quintilian representative raised an appendage in question. These modifications, they were deliberate adaptations to different planetary environments? Precisely, H confirmed, stepping forward to elaborate. Human scientists had developed techniques for accelerated adaptive evolution. When the quantum containment failure occurred, they had hours to implement emergency protocols. Evacuation ships carried genetic template banks, specifically designed for each destination world's conditions. So we're all modified humans? Asked an Iridian counselor, the concept clearly still disturbing despite weeks of exposure to the evidence. You're descendants of humanity, H corrected gently. But you've evolved far beyond the initial templates, the adaptations that allow Iridians to thrive in high radiation environments. For example, have created a distinct species with unique capabilities that unmodified humans like myself could never develop naturally. This perspective, emphasizing the evolutionary advancements rather than just the common origin, seemed to resonate more positively with the assembled representatives. Lyra noted the shift in mood with satisfaction. The approach they had developed together was working, acknowledging the human legacy, while celebrating the diversity that had flourished in the 50 millennia since the diaspora. The archive contains detailed records of the initial colonization efforts, Lyra continued, bringing up new holographic displays showing settlement patterns across the galaxy. Most colonies were established with minimal infrastructure, just enough to ensure survival, while the genetic adaptations took hold. Over generations, as the modified humans adapted further to their environments, distinct species emerged. Dr. Seraphine Quell, an archaeologist who had been brought in to assist with interpreting historical records, added her perspective. This explains countless archaeological anomalies we've encountered throughout the galaxy. Ruins with technological similarities despite being separated by thousands of light years. Cultural patterns that share fundamental structures despite evolving in isolation. The diaspora created a galaxy-wide network of related civilizations that eventually lost knowledge of their common origin. Talon Marov, whose role had been redefined following the crisis, observed from the periphery of the chamber. His initial resistance had gradually given way to scientific curiosity as the evidence became irrefutable. Though still concerned about social implications, he had contributed valuable analytical perspectives to the research initiative. "What of the original Earth?" he asked, addressing H directly. The archive mentions a quantum containment failure, but provides few details about humanity's homeworld. A shadow crossed H's features, a glimpse of personal loss that reminded everyone present that this wasn't merely academic history for the human. Earth was effectively destroyed in the containment failure. The quantum disruption created a cascading reality fracture that rendered the planet uninhabitable. Those who couldn't evacuate in time were lost. The chamber fell silent. The enormity of this ancient tragedy settling over the assembled representatives. Whatever political concerns had dominated their thinking before seemed momentarily trivial compared to the extinction-level catastrophe that had scattered humanity across the stars. Captain Zolak, whose security forces had been retrained to work with, rather than against, the Guardian species, stepped forward. The Guardian species like X1, they were created specifically to protect the human legacy. Yes, H confirmed. Different species were designed for different purposes. Some, like X1, were protectors. Others were environmental engineers, designed to terraform hostile worlds. Some were communication relays, maintaining connections between distant colonies. All were created with genetic recognition systems that would respond specifically to human command patterns. Which explains why they reacted aggressively when we attempted to contain them, Lyra added. They weren't hostile by nature. They were responding to what they perceived as interference with their programmed mission to preserve human legacy. The discussion continued for hours, representatives from throughout the Alliance asking questions and receiving answers that rewrote their understanding of galactic history. Throughout, H remained a calm presence, neither claiming authority nor rejecting responsibility for humanity's complex legacy. As the conference concluded, Director Kale approached H and Lyra privately. The Iridian's demeanor had changed dramatically since the crisis, his administrative confidence replaced by a more reflective, almost humble bearing. "The board has unanimously approved the transition," he informed them. Epsilon O will officially be redesignated as the Interspecies Heritage Center, with Dr. Voss serving as executive director and H as ancestral consultant. Lyra accepted the appointment with mixed emotions. The scientific opportunity was unprecedented, but so was the responsibility of managing knowledge that could potentially reshape civilization throughout the Alliance. "And the Guardian species?" she asked, using the new designation that had replaced the term anomalies. "Full research access granted, with protective protocols as recommended by H," Kale confirmed. "No more containment unless specifically necessary for safety. The board acknowledges that our previous approach was misguided." After Kale departed, H and Lyra found themselves alone in the conference chamber. The holographic displays still rotating slowly, with images of worlds seeded by humanity 50 millennia earlier. "Are you truly the last?" Lyra asked quietly. The question she had been hesitant to voice directly. The archive mentioned administrator as though others might exist. H's expression remained carefully neutral, but something like hope flickered in their eyes. The archive designation is automatic for any unmodified human with the correct genetic markers. But to answer your question, I don't know. The diaspora was widespread and included multiple preservation protocols. It's possible that other human enclaves exist elsewhere in the galaxy, perhaps in suspended animation or isolated regions we haven't yet discovered. Is that why you agreed to stay and help with the research? To potentially find others like yourself? Partly, H acknowledged. But also because regardless of whether other unmodified humans exist, humanity itself continues, through all of you. Different forms, different adaptations, but carrying forward the essential genetic and cultural heritage. That's worth preserving and understanding properly. Lyra considered this perspective, finding unexpected comfort in the idea of connection across such vast evolutionary distances. Then, we'll search together. The Heritage Center's mission will include mapping the full extent of the diaspora and identifying any potential preservation sites that might contain other human survivors. H nodded in agreement, turning toward the galactic display where thousands of worlds pulsed with the light of potential human legacy. It won't be easy. 50,000 years have erased many traces, and some colonies may have failed entirely. But others clearly thrived and evolved into the Alliance species, Lyra countered. If those adaptations succeeded, perhaps others did as well. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from the newly established communication center. A message had arrived from a distant outpost on the galaxy's rim, a research team investigating ruins that matched the architectural patterns documented in the archive. Preliminary scans suggested the presence of preservation chambers similar to the one from which H had emerged. It seems our search may have already yielded results, Lyra observed. Reading the report with growing excitement, H studied the data with careful restraint, neither dismissing the possibility nor embracing false hope. It's worth investigating, but whether or not we find more human survivors, the work here remains essential. Understanding the past is the first step toward creating a more unified future. As they prepared to share the new discovery with the Heritage Council, Lyra reflected on how dramatically her world had changed since H's arrival at Epsilon O. What had begun as a containment breach had transformed into a revelation that connected all sentient species through a shared ancestral legacy. The barriers between anomalies and researchers, between different Alliance species, even between past and present, had begun to dissolve in the light of greater understanding. In her private research journal, Lyra recorded her thoughts on this pivotal moment. Day 1 after the revelation. We have begun transmitting signals to ancient outposts, initiating the Heritage Connection program. But questions remain unanswered. Are there other humans? What will this knowledge mean for interspecies relations as it spreads beyond our immediate control? How will societies adapt to understanding themselves as branches of a common tree, rather than independently evolved entities? These questions have no simple answers. But for the first time, we're asking them together, all species united by the knowledge of shared origins. Whatever comes next, we face it not as separate civilizations, but as distant cousins, finally rediscovering our common ancestry. The human specimen who walked into Epsilon R and triggered a revolution in our understanding now has a name rather than a designation. H has become both a bridge to our collective past and a guide toward a more unified future. Whether truly the last of the original humans, or simply the first we've rediscovered, their presence has forever changed how we see ourselves and each other. Tomorrow, we begin mapping the full extent of humanity's legacy across the galaxy. The journey ahead is vast, but for the first time in perhaps 50,000 years, we undertake it with the knowledge that despite our differences, we share a common origin, a truth that connects rather than divides us. End log. Dr. Lyra Voss, Executive Director, Interspecies Heritage Center, formerly known as Epsilon O Facility. As Lyra closed her journal, H stood at the archive's central interface, sending activation signals to dormant systems throughout the galaxy, beacons calling out across vast distances to anyone who might recognize the signature of humanity's ancient legacy. Whether those signals would be answered remained uncertain. But the search itself represented something profound, a reconnection with a shared past long forgotten, and the first steps toward a future where that shared heritage might unite rather than divide. The Epsilon O facility, once a place of containment and separation, had been transformed into a center of connection and discovery. And though the full implications of this transformation would take generations to unfold completely, the process had begun with a single moment of recognition, when a human-looking creature had walked into the facility's main chamber, and a voice had announced, "Welcome, Administrator." That greeting, intended 50,000 years earlier by humanity for its own descendants, had finally been delivered. And with it, the long-separated children of Earth had taken their first steps toward reunion, not as identical beings, but as diverse expressions of a common origin, each valuable in their uniqueness, yet connected by threads of shared genetic heritage that stretched across the stars. In the archive chamber, now open to researchers from throughout the Alliance, a simple plaque had been installed beside the entrance. It bore a message in multiple languages, but the human version read simply, "To know our future, we must understand our past." To the ancient ancestors who seeded the stars, and to all their descendants who carry that legacy forward, may knowledge unite what time and distance have separated. And beneath these words, a single human handprint pressed into the material, H's contribution to the memorial. Not a claim of ownership or authority, but a tangible connection to the species that had once reached out across the galaxy in a final act of survival and hope, scattering modified versions of themselves among the stars. The handprint served as a reminder that despite 50,000 years of separate evolution and adaptation, a thread of connection remained, a genetic echo that whispered of common origins and shared potential. It was this potential that Epsilon O, in its new incarnation, now existed to explore and fulfill. The human had come home, and in doing so, had helped all the descendants of humanity begin to find their way home as well, not to Earth, which was long lost, but to a new understanding of themselves as part of something larger than individual species or isolated worlds. The journey had only just begun, but the path forward now stretched before them, illuminated by the recovered knowledge of their shared past and the promise of a more connected future. In the vastness of the galaxy, the light of this understanding began to spread, one world at a time, carrying with it a simple truth that had been buried for 50 millennia, that despite all appearances, the diverse sentient species of the Alliance were not strangers to each other after all, but distant relatives finally rediscovering their common ancestry. And in this rediscovery lay the potential for a new kind of unity, one based not on uniformity, but on the celebration of diversity that had emerged from a common source. Much as a single seed can give rise to countless unique flowers, different in form, but connected in essence. The last human, and the first to return, had set this process in motion with a simple touch, awakening not just ancient technology, but an ancient truth that would reshape the galaxy in ways even the original architects of the diaspora could not have fully imagined. The legacy of humanity lived on, not just in the archive or in H's genetic code, but in every sentient being whose ancestors had carried a piece of Earth's final gift to the stars. And now, at last, that legacy was being reclaimed, not as a burden or a source of conflict, but as a foundation for greater understanding across the vast distances of space and time. The story of Epsilon O Facility had become the story of all, a tale of lost origins rediscovered and ancient connections renewed. And like all great stories, its ending was not truly an end, but a beginning. The first chapter in a new narrative of unity that would continue to unfold across the galaxy for generations to come.